It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 do.
Hello and welcome to Spirit Cafe. I'm Barbara Schreiner Trudell, and my co host, Cheryl Rogers, is on vacation today. So we have a special guest co host today. Well, let us begin with the land acknowledgement. And we are honored to work, live, and play on the historical and traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe and Wendat peoples, and more recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Haudenosaunee nations. And as we gather from many places on Turtle Island, we as settlers are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We acknowledge the Indigenous stewards of this land. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous people have made both in shaping and strengthening our country and all of Turtle Island. By making this acknowledgement, we strive to be allies and take an active part in reconciliation. By honoring the land, the history, and the unique Indigenous heritage of our First People, we recognize our oneness, we realize our history, and we choose to create a new reality. We are one. Miigwech. Well, my co-host today is C. Driscoll. C, welcome, welcome. So glad you could join me today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Oh, so grateful to have you here. Well, I just want to introduce our guest today. Our guest is Dr. Anne Therriault. And in high school, she had a dream to go to space, and more exactly, to step on another planetary surface. So in college, she figured out that one way to achieve this dream would be to have a career in planetary geology. We call her the rock doctor. Well, she suggested, she said that to me, and I loved it. She gathered, yeah, it's pretty funny, the rock doctor, I like it. She gathered the skills and education required, including learning English, to end up in 1988 as the first French-Canadian summer intern at the Lunar and Planetary Institute in Houston, Texas. Her work on shock metamorphism effects in rocks from impact structures propelled her forward. That's a mouthful. Working as a research assistant at NASA's Johnson Space Center and making her one of only 5 world experts in the world of shock metamorphism during the 1990s and early 2000s. Wow, this is one smart lady. She obtained her PhD from the University of Ottawa in 2001 while working full-time and starting her family. 2 of her 3 kids were born between her comprehensive and her thesis defense. Wow. Well, and her thesis, her PhD thesis, she studied the rocks from another big impact structure, the Sudbury structure in Ontario, and that's pretty close to us. During her career as an accomplished scientist, accomplished policy analyst, and accomplished manager, Dr. Therriault has been active as a respected and trusted union steward for the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada at Natural Resources Canada. Her love for science continues to live via her public and school or university talks and guest speaking to cover the subjects of impact cratering, meteorites, and general geology. Her passion for healthy and safe workplaces shines via her talks on mental health. That's a big one these days. And wanting to be close to nature and enjoy its benefits. She moved in August 2020 to LaSalle with her amazing spouse, Cheryl, also known as C, who is our guest co-host today. Well, welcome, C. Welcome, Anne. Dr. Anne is in the house, the rock doctor. How
Woo!
Well, we've got lots to discuss today, and we were chatting prior to the show, and we were talking a little bit about the book of Genesis. You had
Yep.
an interesting little factoid about that I kind of liked.
Yeah. When you look at the first chapter of Genesis, when it describes the creation of earth and sky in those 6 days, the actual first 3 days are geologically correct. It's like it's the actual timing that we recognize in the science that we have. So I'm presuming that specific chapter was written by a bunch of scientists way back then.
I think that's awesome. I think that's awesome. Now, you've been studying what's going on in Sudbury, what's happened there. Can you talk a little bit about the impact there and what that and how big it is? Man, you shared that with me the other day. It's huge.
Yeah. So when you when you look at the formation of the Earth, when you look at the solar system, for example, so what do we look up is we see the moon. So when you look at the moon, you see these big dark spots on the moon, and they haven't changed because the moon has not changed in about 3 billion years. But those big dark spots you see are impact craters. And so as the solar system was creating, the objects flying into space, if you want, would bump into each other. And so we have as we look at the moon and we see that the moon is crippled by these impacts, then we said, well, the Earth must have been too, because we essentially are in the same space in space. Yeah. So when we start looking for those scars on Earth, you don't see them, right? You see all these oceans and you see the continents, but you don't see these big scars. That's because the Earth is actually a living planet, and it's forming its land, its crust. And so the old crust that would have been there during the moon is no longer really available for us to see. We have bits and pieces in Australia, in South Africa, and in Canada. So the Canadian Shield has the oldest rock on Earth that's about 4 billion years old.
Wow.
So when you think that half of that, which is 2 billion, is where Sudbury comes into play. And so Sudbury at 2 billion years, as far as the rocks are concerned, it's already after most of what we see on the moon. So that the impacts and the things that are happening have already subsided. Like, today you look at it and you don't see a meteorite hitting us every day that's creating a big crater, right? So these things have gone. So in the time of Sudbury, that's about 2 billion years ago, an object of about 20, let me see, I have to remember, it's 20 times its size. So about 10 kilometers in diameter, and we don't have that many of those anymore. Hit the ground in the Sudbury area and created a crater of about 200 kilometers in diameter. So wow. 200 to 250. So that's pretty big. And if you can picture yourself, if you've been in La Malbaie in Quebec, or you've seen the meteor crater in Arizona, you can actually see a bowl, and there's a hole in the ground where the object created. So in La Malbaie, as you get to La Malbaie, you're at the edge of the crater, and Mont des Éboulements is actually the center where there's actually a peak. So it looks like a sombrero, if you want.
Okay.
Like a hat sombrero.
That's a cool background.
So Sudbury, huge sombrero that was very thin, but that was 200 kilometers in diameter. So it's very old. And what happened in Sudbury is that the rocks melted and then they recrystallize, and that's how we were able to pull together the metals and the minerals that have been the ores that came from Sudbury. So all the platinum, the nickel, all these things in Sudbury are thanks to the impact.
Right. And didn't that help create the crust? Because back then there was no land yet, right?
So that's it. So if you think about it, if you think of Genesis, and it says that it started from darkness, that God was in the darkness also, and everything created out of darkness. And then first we had the seas and the sky. And the seas is that the sea was actually a magma pool. So the earth is actually a ball of fire. And that ball of fire is being hit by different things, and has, when you think that the ocean floor, we don't see it, right? It's underwater. It's a very thin crust underwater, and that the continents are floating on this. How did we get to have continents? And that's the impacts happening into this ocean crust enabled for this differentiation and for the continents to be created. So billions of years ago, before Sudbury, so the first crust was created thanks to the impacts that were happening in order for our surface to look different than just a land of water, like a planet of water. So that's how we got the crust.
Wow.
Wasn't Canada the first crust?
Yes. So, well, that's the first crust. That's the oldest crust that we can find in the Slave Province, Northwest Territories. We have the oldest rocks on Earth that are 4.3 billion years old, and we do have in Austria. They have minerals that are that old, but they don't have the rock that it came from. So we know that there was crust before that, but it's been reprocessed, and like I said, because the Earth is a living planet, things get rehashed and reprocessed. And so when you heard me say that the Earth was a fireball, well, the Earth has also been a snowball, because you were talking about possibly how can climate change get into this picture, right? So I think the easiest way for me would be for you guys to picture a 12-hour clock.
Mm-hmm.
And on that 12-hour clock, 2 minutes before 12 is really the time where the humans have come into play. But for all of this other time, the Earth has been a fireball and a snowball, and then a heat ball, and then a snowball on its own, just because of the processes within the Earth itself. So the fact that humans come into play in the last 2 minutes is that we've been accelerating that process. So we're seeing climate change much more quickly happening than we actually have seen on the Earth. So when I was telling you about what we see on the moon is actually giving us that gap from 0 hour to about 2 hour. We can see from the moon what's happening in the solar system, because we don't have those rocks anymore on Earth. We have our oldest rocks is at about 230. And after that, we see that as the Earth is trying to form its crust, it's forming its oceans, it's forming its atmosphere. It's at about just past 6 o'clock that we have the Earth starting to look like what we know it today. And then as the land is forming, as the life is appearing in the waters, then the actual crust start building. So if you want to picture the Ottawa and the Toronto area in 400 million years ago, which is still twice the age of the dinosaurs, 400 million years ago, we essentially have the Canadian Shield has a barren land. It's rocks. You have beaches, You're being suntan nicely because we're down at about the tropics at the level that the crust was at the time.
Yeah.
But there's no plants. There's nothing. It's a barren land, and you have the oceans. It takes another 200 million years before we can actually see flourishment on those continents with plants and the dinosaurs going around.
Cool. So what are the odds of another another meteor
Oh,
hitting?
yeah, that's a good one. Um, when we look at the impact crater record, we see that big major impacts have happened every 50 million years or so.
Okay.
The last big one was 55 million years ago. So you'd think that we're due 5 millions. but
And where was
but
it?
the thing is that well, the last big one was is Papagai in Russia, if I remember well. And the thing is that when we look for these big things, so the rule of thumb is that an object will create 20 times its size a crater. So in order to have something major, we have to have something that's going to be, 5. If you think that the object is 5 meters, it's not going to make a big difference with 100. 1 kilometer hole is a small hole. So
Yeah.
we have to have something much bigger. So those objects, we know where they are right now. When you look at the solar system, you have the sun. The first planet is Mercury. You have Venus. You have the Earth. You have Mars. Then you have Jupiter and all the other Jovian planets. But between Jupiter and Mars, you have the asteroid belt. And so those are the objects that we have to be worried about as to how can they bump out of their orbits to actually manage to cross ours and hit us. Plus, there are some of those asteroids are called near-Earth objects. So those are the ones that come close to us that, an amateur astronomer will say, hey, there's something coming towards us, or something just went by us. And they're not that big. The big ones, we know where they are, and they're not in any way, shape, or form close to be coming towards us. If you recall, in 1994, the comet Shoemaker-Levy. So now, if I'm taking you outside at the edge of the solar system, where we call it the Oort cloud, and what these objects coming out of are those comets. In 1994, in June, the comet that came into the solar system was actually grabbed by the gravity of Jupiter, and it hit into Jupiter. And when we look at the pieces, the fragments of that comet and the holes they made in Jupiter, and we named the fragments A, B, C, D in letters. The fragment G created a hole in the atmosphere of Jupiter that would have encompassed the entire Earth. So, so the good thing is that Jupiter is a big shield, and so it is protecting us. That the comets are coming in because they are attracted by the gravity of the sun. So they're coming to round around the sun. If we happen to be in that path, it's going to hit us. But if Jupiter comes along before, it grabs it and it protects us. So comets is something else that we don't have a good grasp as to how many and where they are, but they're not very frequent. And when we see them entering the solar system, we have time to prepare for when they're going to actually come to us. So should we worry that the sky is falling on our heads? No, I don't worry. I sleep well at night. I don't have to worry. And but is it possible? It's possible, but there's the risks are not very high right now because there's no such object coming at us.
Oh, phew, good news.
Yeah.
I better pay my visa bill again.
And Anne, isn't the crater in Chicxulub, Mexico, the one that took out the dinosaurs?
Oh yeah. So when you think that 200, well, so between 200 million years ago and 66 million years ago. So for about 150 million years, the dinosaurs were the authority on planet Earth as, the living form. When you think that they did for 150 million years, and us poor humans have only been here for like, essentially 2 minutes, but which is a couple of thousand years, it's nothing, right? So
Or
these poor dinosaurs, they got hit by an object that was about 10 kilometers in diameter. A 10-kilometer diameter object, we know them. They're not coming. But in 66 million years ago, this object hit the Yucatan Peninsula on the Gulf Coast of Mexico and created a diameter impact similar to the size of Sudbury. So now, instead of being 2 billion years ago when there was not anything really going on the surface of the Earth, now you have a major impact, and it provides enough change and affects enough stuff in our system that it first, because of the heat, because of the energy of this impact, localized and on a continental base, you have wildfires. Things are burning. So anything that was there just is singed. So after that, because you actually created a hole, if you've seen the movie The Day After Tomorrow, when you see this example in the movie of this spiral and this hole created in the atmosphere, saying that the higher stratosphere is bringing down cold air. Well, that's what an impact does. It creates a hole into the atmosphere and punches out the air for, like a hole. And so you're bringing down very low temperature onto the ground. So you sort of have a flash freeze. But on top of that, with everything that's gone into the atmosphere as far as dust and debris from the impact and the burnout and all the stuff, you have a cover. If you think of the volcanoes and how the dark cloud, and then for a couple of days that you can't see, the haze is there, and so that prevents the sun rays from coming in, and that creates a nuclear winter effect. So you have sort of the double whammy. It's too hot, and then it gets to be too cold. And then most of the life forms that were there in 65 million years ago, especially the big ones, could not adjust. Okay. And the poor mammals that were small, all that they had to do was find a big dinosaur carcass and live for a couple of times, because they were omnivores, right? So the plants were having a hard time doing their photosynthesis. So if you were an herbivore, you were getting out of luck. If you were a carnivore, well, you did have a lot of carcasses to find, but at one point they would end. So the dinosaurs, because of their requirements, because of their size, could not sustain that change. And the smaller life forms, especially the ones that were most ambivalent and be able to do a lot of stuff, were able to find ways to adapt and continue on.
Wow. And it's interesting how adaptation is kind of what happens, continually. There's constantly a shift that occurs where we have to adapt to the environment as we see it today, because things are changing all the time. There's constant, like you say, it's a living planet. It's constantly evolving. And I know when we went into lockdown for COVID, wow, everything flourished. It was like, take the human out of the story, and all of a sudden we have wildlife, we have lots of grasses and flowers. It was beautiful. So we're a bit of a mess when it comes to what we're doing to the planet.
Yeah, I think that
long to recover. The recovery happened very fast.
Very fast.
Yes, and so to think that humans are I don't know for what reason and what's the drive, but we have gotten ourselves out of flow with the
Yes.
planet that gave us life. So how can we, because I think because we've lost track of what is our real purpose and what are we to be in flow with this planet, that we've put ourselves first type of thing, and now we're causing havoc because it is out of flow. We're not here for ourselves. We're here for the greater oneness and the greater good and the system, right? We're a part of this system.
Yeah, I think sometimes we sort of think that we are the system and everything else should revolve around us rather than the other way around. And consumerism seems to be
Yep.
the thing people are striving for. So that's kind of putting us in a bit of a messy place, to say the least.
I'm smiling and I'm laughing because when you read the second chapter of Genesis,
Yes.
man comes first. So it's like that's
Yeah.
and that's what create, and that's where it's in Genesis 2 that you have the tree of knowledge and evil. And you don't have that in the first one. So
No,
if
you
in the
don't.
first one you stay in flow, everything is good. And for those 6 days, everything is good. And then it goes on forever because the seventh day doesn't have an end.
Yes.
So if you actually abide by that first chapter of Genesis, everything is fine. But for some reason, somebody wrote chapter 2. and
Well, we
and it
did. We're
actually,
part of that.
I know, and it actually shows what humans are doing. It's like don't put the human slant to this story, and it's fine. But if you do, then look what happens.
And if we would return to the ways of our indigenous people, that creates a much more sustainable world.
Yep.
Use what you need, live in harmony with the land and the people. Like, there's something beautiful about that. We're going to go on a little break here. We're going to take a minute and a half, 2 minutes. You're watching Spirit Cafe, and we will be right back. Don't go away.
New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org.
And welcome back to Spirit Cafe. Our guest, Anne Theriault, is just absolutely giving us all kinds of great information and a little bit about the Bible as well, and the joy of humanity and what we're doing to our planet. Now, one of the things I noticed in your bio as well is that you do some work creating healthy workplaces and dealing with mental health. Given what we've come through with the COVID and sort of the interruptions that happened, what are some of the things you're seeing in the workforce today that needs to be worked on or addressed moving forward with our mental health?
Right. Well, it took me about 1 year into COVID and working from home and being someone that has lived experience with depression. Came February 2021, and I was going, what's going on with me? It's like, this is not depression. What is it? It's like, man, I'm languishing. I'm lacking motivation. But if you would have not known depression, you would have thought, oh, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
But what happened to me was that working at home, although I was sharing my house with a lovely person and pets and stuff, working from home alone, I had lost my bearings as to how to energize myself and motivate myself. So to be in the office, to see different people every day dressed head to toe with
Yes.
clothes and stuff, even though I did not interact with them, just crossing their energy fields was motivation. To be able to see people working side by side, to be able to say, okay, I can focus, this person is focusing. It was motivation. So in 2021, I started asking people, how do you do it? How do you keep yourself motivated during the day? Do you remember to chill, or are you just back to back to back to back and working on this stuff on your computer? And so some people started saying, oh my God, we can take a break. Yes, you have to. It's good for you.
Yeah.
So we started sharing tricks. So people would say that they went outside to take a walk, or to clear up some weeds, to walk a pet, that they would be listening to music, that they would call someone for a virtual coffee. So they found ways to motivate themselves. And so I said, okay, I need to do the same for myself. And so that was the one bit. The other bit was that we all went home without a manual as to how to behave. And a lot of us created this, what I call the imaginary punch clock, right next to your computer. And every time you get up, you went ka-chink, I'm no longer at work. And then you come back and ka-chink. When you work in a workplace and you get up, in my case, the printer was only a few steps away. But if I got up to go to the printer, and we're in this cubicle of, the cubicles, I would get someone to see me and say, oh, Anne, you're here. Can you answer this question? And so I would take the time, answer the question. Then I would see someone that I had not seen in a long time. So I would take the time to take their pulse. And then I would go to the printer to realize that, I forgot to press print, go back. And so it could take me more than, I laugh, but it could take me an hour to do this thing.
Yeah.
Well, when I finally got back to my desk, did I ask myself, I just wasted an hour. I'm going to have to stay on another hour. It was part of my workplace. It was part of making it safe and healthy. So then if you are at home and you get up to go for a pee and you see that there's dishes in the sink, hopefully it's the dishes of the day and not the dishes of the week, and you take the time to do the dishes for 5 minutes, it's only a good mental break. It for me, it's an accomplishment. I see things are done. And really, do you turn off your brain while you're doing the dishes? No, you're thinking of the email that you're about to write, or you're thinking of the project that you are on. So then why would you have this punch clock? So it's just part of making sure that your environment, and which is now your work environment, is healthy and safe. And if you're sharing the house with someone, it's not like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm at work, I can't talk to you. It's like, this person is part of your workplace. So you hi, right?
Yeah, that's great information. I know because even I have a 17-year-old daughter, and so it was myself and my husband and her, the three of us in the house, and we did really well trying new things. Like she learned how to bake bread and just coming up with different ways. But I know for me, pulling myself away from the computers always been a little bit of a tough one. It's like you wake up in the morning and into the office, turn on the laptop. And so I'm breaking that now, going, no, no, no. We start with some other things
Yes.
first, making
You
sure
know,
that there's balance.
the unions, when they created or they managed to get this 15-minute break in the morning and the 15-minute break in the afternoon, it
Mhm.
was because it was based on studies to show that taking a mental break, taking a break away is only good for you. And then to take time at lunchtime to break away and take half an hour at the minimum is
Yeah,
only healthy for your whole body, not and your soul, not just, I have to take a break. And now that we are at home, it's not because, or that we're working remotely. It's not because we're working remotely that these don't apply. Taking a break is not because when you were in office, you had to go and take a break. It's because it was recognized as something being healthy. If I
yeah,
could change those breaks to taking 5-minute breaks every hour, it would be even better, because
yeah,
that now the study shows that taking a 5-minute break, even if is to do 2 minutes of meditation every hour, is much more healthy and it will help you perform better. And so going home, people stop taking their breaks.
yeah.
Why they're still there? They're important.
Yeah, it's interesting how we didn't really adapt. We just sort of got dumped in. It happened fast. And I don't think anybody really knew how to manage it. And so here we are. And now, as we're looking at getting back out into, gatherings, there's some resistance around that as well. I don't know if the two of you have noticed that.
Oh yeah.
But when I've done in-person services, I might get 10 people out, but I still have, 15 or 20 online. Are you noticing
Yeah.
that as well, See?
Oh yeah. It's the convenience of being in your pajamas to go to a Sunday service or a Monday night service. People are more tired than we were allowed to be before. We weren't allowed to be at home. We weren't allowed to the conveniences that we've been able to see because of COVID. So a lot of people will never go back
Yeah.
because they need the comfort of home, their tea, their coffee, just chilling on the chair, watching their favorite speaker. And, it just works for them. But
Yeah.
there will be groups of people who will go back, and they're coming more and more. You'll see that they will come,
Yeah.
because at one
Yeah.
point that will not suit everybody who's been languishing in that now, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. I know for
And
me,
and you
I'm
do
more
have,
connection. Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
sorry, and you do have the people that became so complacent in that position that for them now that's another. So it was a major change to go from what we were used to being forced into something that we did not expect. And now we have people that are afraid of the change again and anxious about the change. And how is that going to? And so, a lot of, if you look at how many people have been seeking help for um, mental health before COVID, and now how many people are seeking help now, it
Oh,
hasn't slowed down. And it's because of this too much change. It's the Someone was talking to me about this morning, and I forgot the term, but it's we've been burned out by change, and
yeah.
so it's not just being unable to adapt, is that it's just too much. It's a surcharge. That's it. It's a surcharge on our system, and we did not allow ourselves to actually embrace each of the change to be able to go on and replenish our resources.
And I
Mhm.
think people are still, like, I hear a lot of people talking about wanting to get back to normal. And for me, that's kind of like, well, number one, normal doesn't exist. It's different for everybody. So it's not really a thing. And the thing is, we're never going backwards. We're always moving forward. Like the universe is something that's always moving in a forward motion, I think, anyway. And as such, going backwards would be kind of redundant. Like what we were doing back there wasn't so great. What we need to do, we need to create something better, something, some kind of brighter future moving forward. And I think maybe returning to the land, doing more in that way rather than consume massive quantities of anything and everything. What do you
Yeah,
think?
coming back into flow, uh, and
Yeah, yeah,
and and to be able to recognize that uh, connections, physical connections, are required.
yes,
To the three of us seeing each other on the screen today, because we actually interact. At the end, we would just say, "Hey, I saw Barb today, and she looked good, and she should be doing well." But I never asked you. So how
yeah,
can I actually know, right? So
yeah,
it's not because you see someone on the screen that you can say, "Oh, I saw Cheryl. She was at the talk last week. She's doing fine." No, we actually have to be able to be in connection. And
yeah,
over the video and over the phone is one thing, but to actually be together, to be able to take the real pulse, because
yeah.
you can hide behind the video, you can hide behind the voice, and you, people may not be able to really detect how well or unwell you are doing.
Yeah, it's true. And I think physical touch is such an important thing, and that got taken away. And I think that's probably had a massive impact on the overall mental health of people. Like we're seeing an upswing in violent acts and things, at least here in Toronto on the TTC, as sort of something that's really unusual, that people are choosing to stab somebody they don't even know. Does that seem to you like, because of that lack of connection, that's creating a bit of anxiety or anger or whatever that's now being perpetrated on just anybody for the sake of, I'm angry and I need to act out? I don't know.
There's been
Well,
shifts though as well. Uh,
Hmm.
the earth is shifting quite dramatically right now. I'm feeling a lot more heightened energy. And
Hmm.
people who don't know how to look at that and observe it as opposed to react with it, then
Yeah.
they're going to overreact. But when you can observe the heightened energy, and as an energy therapist, it's just like crazy the amount of energy that's coming right now.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm
yeah.
feeling
I,
it as well. Go ahead, Anne.
now I think that yes, there's an element to that, definitely, but um, the the rage, maybe the energy rage that people are feeling, to me, maybe a lot of it has to do with the lack of control. You know how control and acceptance and safety and security are the main pillar to balance. Well, the fact that we were not in control of having to stay home, not in control of, vaccinate, no, don't vaccinate, not in control of where this came from, not in control of not being able to go where I wanted when I wanted to. And so all of this lack of control may be at the source of a lot of the anger out there, because people
Yeah, I
have,
think so.
which they had control over, suddenly was taken from them.
Yeah, everything, having to wear masks whether you want to or not, getting vaccinated or getting fired. Those were your options. I think those things really have taken their toll, and I don't think we've gotten over it yet.
Yeah.
And now
No.
they're talking about children who are getting sick, and so there's a lot of fear. There's no control over anything. You can't even go to the store and buy the things you're accustomed to buying when you want to buy them.
No.
Sometimes it's just not
No.
available, right? So I think you're right, Anne. That idea of control is, yeah, we've lost it. I'm not sure we ever actually had it, but we had the illusion of it.
Yeah.
And
Some, yeah.
and now we're back in the real world. So what we want to do is then get into the flow, which would allow us then to live in a more conscious state in harmony with whatever's going on around us rather than in opposition to it.
Yeah. And you know, the Buddhists have that flow thing down to a science because they took the sound of the cedar trees in the Himalaya mountains,
Yeah.
because they're all one root system and they're in a constant state of growing, developing a natural flow, healthy flow. And
Yeah.
they took that sound, they called it Om,
Yes.
and Om is really interesting. Later was discovered by a scientist named Schumann,
Yeah.
and he called it the Schumann resonance. So when you chant Om, which is the healthy vibration between the earth and the edge of the ionosphere, you start to feel connected and in flow. And it's such a perfect, easy healing. It's about 3.87 hertz or 72, whatever hertz. And you can find the sound everywhere, but it is so beautiful. And it really brings you back to your natural capacity, just to be and to be still.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And you know, the Om is so powerful. I can still remember the very first time I heard somebody chanting the Om and what that did. Like my whole body was vibrating from that energy. And it
Yeah.
was like, man, I'm gonna liken this. This is better than alcohol or anything like this is kind of feeling.
It is. It is. But
Yeah.
you can't get people off the, you know, I got a family friend there who just won't drop the alcohol for the Om, and that's a struggle. But anyways, you know, I just want to ask Anne, if that's okay, about how she went from being a Catholic to being a Unity New Thought person, because that's a huge thing. Your whole life was Catholicism. You were the piano player at your church for 20 years. You know, I mean, suddenly you're like in this whole Unity New Thought thing, and like, what happened?
Yeah. Well, I was shown the light. The idea is that for the longest time I wanted to have my spiritual side grow, and I was seeking and just going to church and listening to the priest every Sunday was not enough, and I couldn't find more. I got involved with the Opus Dei in order to get some of their training, and still that was not satisfying, and there was something missing. And then when finally I was introduced to Unity, and I started looking at the Bible in a different way, and then Unity with all the courses that are offered, it's like, man, did I expand in the last 3 years. But it made me see that, wait a minute, it's not that the Roman Catholic is bad, but it was so structured that it's telling you what to think. It's telling you what this is. It's telling you the interpretation. And when you get into Unity, where it's actually showing you that God is within, that if you actually master the way to listen to the small voice, you get to be all that Jesus was and more. And it's like, wait a minute, that's great, because I was thinking in those lines, but I wasn't able to find that, and to be able to find that things that I thought, you know, that I was given as information, and you know, I was really the prescriptive naivete, right? That you believe what the masters say,
Exactly.
and then you actually you're able to put that in question, and you go, wait a minute, Jesus never said that. It's nowhere in the Bible.
Yeah.
Wait. so I've come to Unity because I was fortunate to have a loving spouse who said, I'm here in my spirituality, you're there in your spirituality, and there's something called Unity in the middle that if we go there, we can meet. And
Mm.
indeed, we are meeting in unity, and we are expanding from there, because unity is not, here's what you have to know, here's how you have to react it, and here's how you have to think it. And no, this is amazing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I
Okay.
love about that, Anne, is that, when we get into New Thought, Unity or CSL or UFBL, whoever, what happens is we are challenged to think for
Yep.
ourselves, to make decisions for ourselves, because we are responsible for our life and the impact that it has globally, really. So if each one of us takes back our own personal responsibility rather than doing what we're told, we begin to stand out rather than fit in.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's very well said.
That to me is the excitement, because I had my spiritual epiphany in a Nazarene church. I was raised without religion, but at 27, my mother-in-law said, "Hey, come to church," and I wanted her to like me, so I went. But what I didn't expect, it was the only reason I went. I thought I can endure an hour of this. But what I discovered when I went there is the lights got turned on. I woke up, and it was a whole new experience from there, of kind of walking that path for about a year and a half and going, this isn't what my epiphany moment was. That was my oneness with this loving, loving energy. And you're talking about heaven and hell, and how, everybody else is going there except us. And I'm like, nah, it doesn't really resonate. And that's when I found New Thought after that. So it's that journey of kind of waking up, which, sort of takes us from the dinosaurs to the spirituality.
Yep, I
We
know.
managed to morph into a new conversation here. Way to go, see. You brought it first full circle. Ta-da. That spiritual journey is so important. And I think, doing our daily meditation and using the Om, that resonance going into meditation or into prayer is pretty powerful as well.
Very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Anne, is there any particular practice that you found is really beneficial to you, having moved from Catholicism to Unity? Is there one thing that's been the most important to you?
Wow. There's so many. I'm still in the hate, the highlight of learning and being exposed to so many things. When you say that 3 years ago you would have talked to me about meditation, and I would have said, nah, ain't gonna happen, no way can I stop this brain from thinking. And then to
Yeah.
actually learn what meditation is about, and to actually get to the point of being able to meditate. I gave birth to 3 kids without having to learn Lamaze, because there was no way somebody was going to tell me how to breathe. And then my spouse told me that you need to know how to breathe. I said, no, ain't going to happen. And she says, oh, yes, you have to. And so in the last 3 years, I've learned how to deep breathe, and how
Yeah.
that is so important. And I'm thinking, why are we not teaching these things to the first graders, like how to breathe, how to be able to relax, how to be able to get in touch with your inner self? Because a lot of the stress and the anxiety that you faced, you probably wouldn't, because you would know how to look at it differently, and to manage it, and
Yeah.
I've gone from suffering from depression to managing my depression, and now to basically I just probably live with it. I don't even have to manage it that much, because I'm not being impacted by it so much, because
Yeah.
I've learned to breathe, I've learned to meditate, I've learned to be able to do the reflection. And I love so much, I think of what I have noticed is that for me it's not so much going to services that is important, is to be able to take the time and have a mini retreat on a regular
Yeah.
basis, and take a
Yeah.
book, take a scripture, take something, and go and read and reflect, and try to put it, and metaphysically interpret it. How does it speak to me?
Yeah.
What's the message I'm getting out of it?
Love.
What are the lessons?
Yeah.
It's all that, embracing all that right now. So I cannot say that there's one particular thing that I do, because all of them are important.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is there's so many elements that we begin to integrate as we learn a new model. What about you, C? How long have you been in Unity?
Well, I visited in 2017, and then I only went for a few services. Something happened in my life. I don't remember.
Yeah,
Disappeared for a while. Came back in 2020.
yeah,
But it's as a Sufi who's been at that for 36 years,
yeah.
I came across because the Sufis are encouraged by their teachers,
Mm.
and I did this for my students to try everything,
Yes.
to understand the Tao, to look into unity, to look into Catholicism, to look
Mm.
into Buddhism, Hinduism,
Yeah.
name it, the yogi experience. When you look and you see where you fit into everything and how everything contributes to your self mastery and
Mhm.
you're unfolding into the oneness with God, whatever you want to call it, it's been profound. So I knew Emily Cady long before I knew Unity, right? I knew Ernest Holmes before I knew Unity or
Yeah.
CSL. I knew all the books and the teachers, and I was reading. I didn't go to the churches or the communities at the time because Sufism is a very personal journey, and you just need to take what you have, go in and do your work because it's really about working from the inside out at
Yes.
all times.
Yes.
You're always engaging with the heart because that is the path of the Sufi. So yeah, so unity. I came and went in 2020. I wasn't willing to sit down every Sunday morning, and I wanted to go outside and do some woodworking and play with my dogs. But finally, now that I've been studying
Yeah.
the New Thought movement more and more and more, I just can't get enough, and I'm definitely engaged every day
That,
somehow with the New Thought movement. People, reading, classes,
yeah.
prayer, meditation, and it's been great.
Yeah, that's, I know for me when I found it, it was such a natural and organic fit. It was like finding my home,
Mhm.
that energy. Because for me, everything again comes from the heart space. So it's all about love and that energy of love, which to me means oneness and
Yeah.
really acknowledging that my journey is an individual one that I must take on my own. However, how I take it and what I do with it impacts the whole because everything is connected. And so for me, that's really created a wonderful a wonderful sense to life, where it used to be so hard, it was so difficult, I was so unhappy, and then all of a sudden now it's like, I have my moments, my ups and downs like everybody else, but the truth is that life is quite pleasurable and just gets better all the time. So that I'm really, really grateful for. That
Yeah.
it's so good. Well, we're down to our last minute and a half. Final thoughts. And what final thought do you have for today's show?
That science and religion can go hand in hand. That when you look, like I said, to Genesis, the first 3 days were pretty much on bang on. We all come from darkness, and God was in everything and and everywhere then, and He still is. And
Yeah.
so it's for me is now trying to figure out what is really my role in this, and I'm not my role as a human for humans, but is what is my role as an individual in the oneness, in the earth's system. So what
Beautiful.
am I here to do?
Love it. See, what about you?
I'm grateful that I met this amazing human and my rock doctor years ago, and we have exploded open through the New Thought movement, and it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm grateful. So thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I've got my Pierre, and the life that we've created together over the last 21 years has been powerful and positive. And again, New Thought has been one of the vehicles that moves our relationship forward as well. So full circle, full circle. Thank you so much for being here. See, thank you for being my co-host today,
Thank you.
and we'll have you back next week. Dr. Ann, the Rock Doctor, you rock, girl. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. Love you all. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you for watching. And we'll be back next week with something new, something wonderful, and something to explore. See y'all then.
Bye.
Bye.
Change, change. You can do it. Change, change. It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things.